When you hold the Bible in your hands, you're holding the end result of a long process. Of course, we know that the scriptures were written thousands of years ago, and they've come to us somehow. So the focus of this session is to talk about how that came about, the transmission of the text, how it came to us. We want to look at how that happened. We'll begin with an example of that to try to make things more clear. We'll talk also about the chapter and verse divisions and text criticism. We also want to talk about canonization, especially the canonizing community and this thing called canon criticism. To help us understand the transmission of the text, we'll begin with an illustration. Let us say that we had the original manuscript. When we say original manuscript, we're talking about the piece of paper or papyrus that the author actually wrote on. The manuscript means the handwritten copy that, or I shouldn't say copy, the handwritten original that the author actually wrote. Now, to come to us, it had to undergo many copies. So think, for example, of copy 1, shall we say. Copy 1 was a copy directly copied from the thing that Paul wrote or that Matthew wrote and so forth. But then that copy was also copied. So we can call that copy 2. Now, unlike copy 1, which was copied directly from the original manuscript, copy 2 was copied from copy 1. Now, in the human process of copying, you know that every time something is copied, a few little errors come in. For example, spelling errors. We can't say punctuation errors because punctuation hadn't been invented yet, but those kinds of errors might come in. And then maybe copy 3. Again, copy 3 was copied from copy 2. Now this process, these 3 copies, perhaps took hundreds of years, over which a copy was made from a copy, maybe 1 per generation or something like that. Now imagine for this illustration that before copy 3 was written, sometime before that, there was another copy made, but of the original manuscript. We'll call that copy alpha. So we can see that copy A and copy alpha have something in common, namely that they were copied from the original manuscript. So even though copy 1 and copy alpha may not have been copied at the exact same time, they both were copied from the original. And then copy alpha got copied, we'll call that copy beta. And then copy beta got copied, we'll call that copy gamma. So now we have 6 copies from one another. But here's the bad news. The original manuscript, it's gone. We don't have that anymore. We have no access to any of the original author's autographs, the things that they wrote with their own hand. So now we have what we call families of texts. Families of texts are related one to another. So we can say that copy 1, 2, and 3 are all related to one another because they're all copied from copy 1. In the same way, copy alpha, beta, and gamma are all related to one another because they're copied from one another. Or I should say all copied from copy alpha. So we ask this question, within each family, which one do you suppose is the best, most reliable copy? Yeah, it should be the earliest one. So copy 1 is better than copy 2, and copy 2 is better than copy 3, and even copy alpha is better than copy beta, and beta is better than gamma. But which one's the overall best? You might be tempted to say, well, it's copy 1, of course, because it was copied first. But you can't assume that the oldest outside of a family is best. It depends on the quality of the copyist. So if the person who copied copy 1 was kind of sloppy, well, then copy 1 wouldn't be best. Maybe copyist 1 is, maybe he didn't get any sleep the night before, or maybe he didn't drink his coffee. Oh no, maybe that wasn't invented yet. But anyway, copy alpha just might be better. So you can't just go by age alone. Within a family, yes, you can go by age. But between families, you have to evaluate on other grounds than just age alone. So when you look at those things, you have to evaluate pretty carefully what was going on. And when you compare texts, it's a complicated process. Another piece of complication is the chapter and verse divisions in the Bible. The chapter divisions, with some exceptions, but basically the chapter divisions were added in the 1200s. So many centuries ago, but thousands of years in some cases after the texts were written themselves. And the verse markings, the ones that we currently use, those were added even later than that. They were added in 1551. So they are nowhere near the original. They're very, very, very late additions to the text. Of course, they're very useful to us. We can easily look things up in the Bible, but we have to be careful to remember that when Paul was writing, for example, he didn't sit down and say, I think I'll start a new chapter now. No, he didn't do that. Everything was just flowing text in those days. So if we look at an example of this, or look up maybe Mark 15, 27 to 29 in the NIV, and look it up again in the King James. What do you see? Well, you'll notice right away that in the NIV, verse 28 is missing. But is that the right way of asking, or rather the right way of saying that? Is it proper to say that 28 is missing? Well, the number 28 is missing, that's true. But remember that the number was added in what year? 1551. So the question has to be, back, did Mark actually write what is in the verse that we call 28? The short answer is no. He didn't write that. Verse 28 was what we call verse 28. Those words were added sometime before 1551, but much, much later than the original that Mark wrote. So we might say it was copy gamma or something like that when those words got added in. And why did they get added in? Well, it's a simple process. The scribe who was copying that particular copy, he was a pretty good scribe, and he knew his stuff, we can say. Or maybe she, but I don't think in the ancient world that very many scribes were female. But he, as I say, was very familiar not only with Mark, but with the other Gospels. And so when pen was coming to paper, the scribe was remembering the other Gospels, saying, my copy must be missing something because I remember it this way, remembering from the other Gospel. And so that scribe wrote down what he remembered from the other Gospel. And that's why those words were added in. They're not original, but they make some sense because they were copied from another Gospel. Text criticism is the process of unraveling all of this complexity. We call it text criticism. We saw it earlier in another video. But it's criticism. Remember, what is criticism? Criticism is sustained, disciplined study. So text criticism is sustained, disciplined study of the text. So meaning to say, what words were really there? What words are the original words of the manuscripts that the original author wrote? Text criticism is a very complex process. But we can talk about the results of text criticism. First of all, we can say that we are very confident, that we're very, very close to the original text. Someone has estimated that we're about 90% confident of the text of the Old Testament. And even better than that in the New Testament, about 99%. confident in the text of the New Testament. And even those places where we're not completely sure, we're not 100% confident, nevertheless, those differences, we call them textual variants, places where the texts are different, none of them rise to the level of changing our doctrine of the text, of the Scripture. So no doctrines are changed based on the remaining uncertainties of the text. Another thing that we need to consider is what's called canonization. Canonization is the process of deciding what belongs in the Bible and what doesn't belong in the Bible. We talk about a canonizing community. The canonizing community is the community that made the decisions about the canonizing process. So canonization is the process of deciding which books belong in the canon. Canon is just a specialized term for what we call the Bible. And so the canonizing community is the one that decided which ones belong, that is to say, which books belong in the Bible and which ones don't. We can also talk about canon criticism. Since it uses the word criticism, it must be sustained, disciplined study. So canon criticism is sustained, disciplined study of the canon. There's really two kinds of canon criticism. Canon criticism kind number one is researching the process of canonization. So a great deal of study has been done into how and why the decisions were made as to which books go into the canon. But the second kind of canon criticism is researching the meaning that is attached by the way that the canon was put together. So for example, why is the Pauline corpus first before the other letters of the New Testament? What meaning was attached to that? Why did the canonizing community put them in that order? Or the Gospels, why is Matthew first and John last? These decisions were made by the canonizing community. And so we want to understand, why did they do that? And what is the importance of that? So the basic answer, in simplest terms, is that first is most important. So these are the things that are decided in canon criticism. So when you hold the Bible in your hands, you're holding the end result of a long process, the transmission of the text, and how the text was decided, which texts even belong in the Bible. And we've studied that, we meaning the Christian community has studied this so carefully, so that our understanding of the text is much deeper as a result of this careful study of the text.